Welcome to HB Reddit Stories. Today we will see stories of r/am I the a-hole. Am I the a-hole for offering to sell my seat to Honeymooners? I was flying from Melbourne to Dubai. I paid for a premium economy seat because it is a 14-hour flight and I want to be comfortable. The person in the next seat had been upgraded and they asked if I could switch seat with their wife as they had just gotten married and were on their honeymoon. I congratulated him on his nuptials and asked where his wife was sitting. He pointed towards the back of the plane. In economy. I declined to switch seats. He asked if there was any way to convince me. I offered to switch if he paid the difference between the seats. It is a goodly amount. I had been lucky to get mine at a decent price. It would only have cost him $1,000 AUD. He said that they were on a budget for their honeymoon. I congratulated once again and put in my earbuds. He muttered that I was an a-hole. I said he was a prick for taking the upgrade instead of either sitting with his wife or giving it to her. I told my wife about the incident and she thinks I should have done the nice thing. For the record, she hates flying in economy, so I know she would not have switched. Top comments. Not the a-hole. If he really wanted to sit with his wife, I'm sure the person sitting beside her would have loved an upgrade to premium economy. He was essentially asking you to pay for his wife's upgrade. As a seasoned flyer from Australia who also works in aviation, I smell a rat. Presumably they booked together. They would have had the opportunity to plead their case when the upgrade was processed, either by contacting the airline prior to the day of flying, or in person at the airport. My bet is that they either booked separately, so she couldn't be taken into account, or he has some kind of status with the airline. And I'd also bet that the newlywed yarn was just made up for sympathy. He didn't have to take the upgrade, and you are not to blame for his selfishness and lack of planning. Not the a-hole. I'm so tired of people thinking they can guilt someone into giving in, even expecting them to lose money in the deal. This guy is the a-hole and I don't think his marriage will last. They just got married and he already abandoned his new wife for the good life. His wife now knows she made a mistake. Hopefully she'll get out before too long. The a-hole is the guy who took the upgrade, left his wife in economy, and tried to guilt a stranger into swapping seats with his wife. He had options. He could have either refused the upgrade, paid the price difference you offered, or swapped seats with his wife. Suggesting that you are the a-hole in this scenario confirms he's awful. Good luck to his new wife. Not the a-hole. Next story. Am I the a-hole for agreeing with my niece being booed at her sister's wedding and then later putting her in check? I have two nieces, and one recently got married. The other one is pregnant with her first child. At the reception, she used her toast time to announce it. My niece is selfish like that and has always stolen the spotlight. She always got away with it though because she was the favorite. Well, she didn't get away with it this day. The groom's family and friends immediately booed her loudly. The best man, groom's brother, said on the mic, "How dare she use his brother's wedding to announce that, and this day is not about you." The booing changed to applause, and not just from his family and friends. I clapped too. My selfish niece and her husband left out of embarrassment. I went to the bride to check on her and hug her. That's when I found out my niece asked the bride for permission to announce it weeks ago, because it's practical since the whole family will be there, but the bride said no. She wanted that day to be about her and her husband. This made me very glad I clapped. Later on, selfish niece sent me a text blasting me for clapping while she was being humiliated. I ignored it. She called me the next day and blasted me, but this time I told her she deserved it. I told her I knew her sister asked her not to announce anything, but you had to make it about you like always. Then she had the nerve to tell me she's always been your favorite niece, and, while that's true, that pushed me over the edge. I told her she, the bride, had to be someone's favorite since you held that title with both of your parents. Unlike you, she has a kind and selfless spirit that she'll pass on to her first child. Then I told her I don't want to hear from you until you grow the F up and apologize to your sister. Then I hung up. Now I'm all kinds of AHs to my sister, their mom, and other family members for clapping and my words over the phone. I don't regret the clapping, but did I go too far over the phone? Top comments. Not the a-hole. But now I'm wondering if the bride had a feeling her sister would make the announcement anyway and suggested the booing to her new in-laws and hubby's friends. Opie replies. I think she told her, then, fiancé about it, but I doubt she planted suggestions. She's not mean like that. Not the a-hole. Honestly, she got what she deserved. She asked the bride if she could announce it, bride said no, she did it anyway, and everyone there booed her. Good for humbling her because your niece needed it. She tried to hijack a wedding just for attention. Not the a-hole. More people should be like the groom's family and friends and boo anyone who tries to hijack other people's special moments. You're a good aunt contrary to what those awful people say. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my father to get over the vase my son broke? When I was a teenager, my father bought a large glass vase, which he filled with wine corks. For years, it stayed on top of a small table in the living room. My family visits him monthly for lunch. Last October, my son was running around my father's living room and accidentally knocked the table over, which caused the vase to fall down and break. I immediately apologized and offered to buy a new vase. My husband and I also cleaned everything up. My father declined my offer to replace it. At the time, he said he understood it was an accident and was just glad my son hadn't gotten hurt. He was 2 years old at the time, and there was a lot of glass on the floor. During the next couple of months, I apologized and offered to pay for a new vase multiple times. My father continued saying it was fine. However, earlier this year, my father started talking about how much he loved the cork vase, and how expensive it had been back when he bought it. As the following months went by, his complaints began to escalate. He'd make comments about the fact that my son broke the vase almost every time we came over. Occasionally, he'd also joke that we should plan our visits with longer notice so that he could hide his valuables from my kid. Last week, he threw a party at his place, which we attended. A friend of his who hadn't visited in a while noticed the vase was gone and asked about it, to which my father replied that my little crap had broken it and I hadn't replaced it. My husband was nearby and heard it. After the party, I confronted my father, and we fought. He said that he had the right to complain about the fact that my son had damaged his property. I told him that while he has the right to be upset, the fact that he declined my offer to buy him a new vase does not entitle him to complain about me not doing it. He can either retract his forgiveness and work something out with me or get over the vase and stop blaming my toddler for the accident. I won't have him calling my son names over this. My father is still insisting I'm in the wrong here. Am I the a-hole? The solution would be to buy him a vase for Father's Day, his birthday, Christmas, every holiday. Buy him a vase in perpetuity. Make him so plentiful with vases he wishes he never sees another vase again. Problem solved. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. For F's sake, your son was a toddler doing toddler things. Your dad should have toddler-proofed the house. You offered to pay for a new vase, he declined. He can STF you about it. I always thought collecting and displaying wine corks was bizarre. Hey, look at how much I drink, everyone. Next story. Am I the a-hole for refusing to do yard work after my wife built a garden? My wife, 29F, and I, 31M, bought our first house this past winter. The house is in decent shape, but the yard needed a lot of work. We spent the winter planning what we wanted to do with the yard in terms of landscaping. My wife has always wanted a garden, but I have a severe bee/wasp allergy and I did not want to plant a bunch of stuff that would attract those insects to our yard. She kept begging me to let her build a garden and told me that there are going to be insects in our yard anyway. I carry an EpiPen with me pretty much all the time when I'm outside, but I would prefer not to have a deadly threat in my yard at all times. I went out of town for work for a week about 6 weeks ago. When I got back, I saw that my wife had done a lot of work in the yard. She had bought a few raised planting beds and started a little vegetable garden. She had also dug up a couple areas on both sides of our driveway and planted a bunch of native plants and flowers as pollinator gardens. I'll admit, my first reaction probably wasn't the best. It was something along the lines of, "What the F are you thinking?" We got into a pretty big fight about it because she kept downplaying how much of a problem it would be for me. She kept saying things like, "They won't sting you unless you bother them. They are going to be in our yard anyway. Native pollinator plants are important. You have an EpiPen anyway." Now, I'm not necessarily disagreeing with any of those statements. But to me, she is inviting deadly threats into our yard. And to make it worse, she is telling me it's not a big deal. I told her that if she wants to keep all of that stuff in our yard, she just signed up for doing all the yard work by herself because I am not going to put myself at risk just so that she can grow a few zucchinis. I am not going to mow the lawn or pull weeds if it means I might get stung. She told me I am overreacting, but since she wants to keep everything she planted, she begrudgingly agreed to do all the yard work. Well, now that summer is in full swing, she doesn't like that arrangement. She complains that it's too hot and the yard work would go a lot faster if both of us were doing it. She complains that the grass grows too fast and doesn't like having to spend time every weekend mowing. But then she will also post videos on social media about all the bees that her pollinator garden is attracting. This past weekend she told me she was too tired to mow and asked me to do it. I told her that we already agreed she would do all the yard work since she wanted to keep her gardens. She again told me I am overreacting and that I need to help. I told her that I am not putting myself at risk when we both know there are more bees in our yard now because of her gardens. I have taken on a lot more of the household chores to compensate for her doing the yard work, so it's not like I'm slacking off. She refuses to see things from my POV. Top comments. Not the a-hole. To begin with, it sounds like you and your wife were still in the planning stages when she went behind your back and planted her preferred garden. Second, she is being really dismissive of a deadly allergy. An EpiPen isn't a cure-all for your problem. You still need to go to the emergency room if you are stung, and there can be lingering effects for days afterward. By inviting bees into your yard, she's really increasing your chance of being stung. It's great that your wife is concerned about pollinators, but it would be nice if she was concerned about her husband too. Not the a-hole. On some level, I can agree with your wife. In many years of gardening and even having raised bees, I've never been stung except the one time a bee got in my glove after I did some hive work. You're probably at more risk driving to work than you are in a garden. But, you don't F with anaphylaxis, especially not someone else's anaphylaxis. The odds are low, but if it does happen, it's so dangerous. Not to mention anxiety and fear you may feel. Your solution of her doing the yard work is eminently reasonable. If she finds it too much work, there are ways of reducing it if she wants. There are low-maintenance gardens and lawn solutions that take less mowing. Or she can just put in the work because this is her hobby and her choice. Have a severe gluten allergy? Here, honey. Let's bake flour bread for fun. Allergic to nuts? Ignore the bowl of peanuts on the coffee table, you'll be fine. It's asinine a partner would disregard life-threatening allergies for her own amusement. Worse yet, willfully cruel to invite such allergies into the partner's environment, planting extra tempting pollination zones, and then expect them to deal with it. Not the a-hole. I'm sorry your wife is being careless with your health. Next story. Am I the a-hole for turning a family argument into a massive situation that now involves theft? I, 20M, come from a crap show of a family. One of my uncles is a raging narcissist, but everyone still talks to him unfortunately. I will call him Frank. Yesterday, we had a small family dinner since it's my grandmother's birthday. Frank and his wife Sarah are awful to Frank's daughter from his first marriage, Clara, 18F. I would never stop if I explained it all, but all you need to know is that Clara is innocent. They hate her for no reason. Frank hosted a family dinner yesterday and they were trying to use Clara as a servant. She had already cooked most of the food and they were trying to make her clean up. She had enough and called her stepbrother, her stepdad's son, to collect her. I've met her stepbrother a few times and he's a very nice guy, but he does not mess around about his sisters, Clara included. He used to have major anger issues, but he's calmer nowadays. Her stepbrother arrived, and Frank said that he wasn't going to let Clara leave until she washed all the dishes. Other cousins offered to help, but he said that since she made all the dishes, because she did all the cooking, she had to wash them. He then hid her shoes and phone so she couldn't leave. For the first time ever, my mother and other elders were standing up to him and demanding that he let her go home, but he wasn't budging. An argument started, you know, the type where all the kids are cleared out of the room. Clara started crying, and was just going to do the dishes, but I was like, no a-hole here, no way. I went outside to her stepbrother's car, and turns out one of Clara's cousins from her mom's side was also there with him. They asked what was taking so long, and I informed them of the situation. This is where I might be the a-hole, since I knew these two would go in the house and get Clara out by any means necessary. I let them in, and all I can say is that Clara's shoes and phone were returned immediately. I stayed outside, and I am not lying when I say that those men shouted so loudly the windows were shaking. Her stepbrother and cousin also then took a pair of Frank's shoes, TV remote and a few other things just because they could. Now, everyone is mad at me. My mother is saying I was an a-hole because they were trying to get the situation sorted, which is true. That was the first time I saw anyone stand up to Frank. She said now that I got Clara's maternal family involved, things are a million times worse. Clara's older brother, not the stepbrother, who is also Frank's son who couldn't make it to the family dinner, has completely disowned his father and is refusing to return a car and lawnmower he borrowed. They are demanding I apologize to Frank, and that I also ensure his belongings are returned to him. I don't think I am an a-hole because it's his fault he refused to let Clara go, but my sister told me to post here. Am I the a-hole? Top comments. Not the a-hole, F everyone who's telling you to apologize to Frank. For what exactly? You unleashed a Delta Force security team to un-F Frank's hostage situation. Good for you. OP replies. Delta Force is the perfect way to describe it. Clara's stepbrother literally walked in there, asked her if she wasn't being allowed to go home, and then her cousin physically picked her up and walked out. It was great. Holding a grown woman against her will, Frank should be happy he isn't missing teeth. OP replies. He's gotta thank her stepbrother's anger management teacher for that. Not the a-hole. Should have called the cops when he stole her belongings. She's 18 and an adult, and he was illegally trying to detain her. OP replies. Cops take like 10 years to come out to non-violent situations in our city, unfortunately. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel HB Reddit Stories.